Welcome to the Ranchonomics podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Good morning. Welcome to the Ranchonomics podcast. I'm John Haskell, and I'm here with Aaron Helmick from West Virginia, beautiful West Virginia. And we're going to talk about sell-by marketing today. We are at the KLR Marketing School now, hosted by Ranching for Profit in Laramie, Wyoming. And we are talking about sell-by marketing applied in different contexts. Aaron lives in the East, which is certainly different from where I live, and works with both cows and sheep. And Aaron, if we can, let's talk about how you got into sell-by marketing. How were you introduced to it? And then how do you apply it in your operation?
We were introduced to it from strictly the concept of the ranching for profit world and people we'd run into. We had actually not had any formal training. So when we started that system, it was literally, we needed what we called eating money. So we had to find a way to generate extra cash flow to stay on the ranch or the farm, we call it, because my wife and I are full time there. So we read an alternative because production was very low. We needed to either find a job or find a way to make that work. We began the process there, and actually Wally was gracious enough to receive and field a bunch of phone calls, gave me a 101 over the phone when I had questions. And
before you ever took a class?
Yeah, it was 2 years before we took our first class. Mm-hmm. We did some reading as well and that kind of thing. I think Roger Ingram was actually been the one that I had credit for actually introducing me to the topic, because he did a sheep outlay for continuing ed, it was a cattle outlay on a ranch who had just implemented stockmanship. And then we talked about a marketing conversation after that. And then that actually was what planted the seed, if I actually think back about it.
Very good. Roger Ingram, for those that don't know, is a former extension educator out of Northern California. He and Dave Pratt, I think, have been close since early in their career.
Yeah, cool guy.
And he has had a lot to do with RFP over the years.
Yep.
Yeah, really neat guy.
So we started literally with metal. In other words, we were flipping gates, trucks, trailers, anything we could. It was a small pile of cash we had and grew that pile and then did it with livestock. And then we were introduced to running it through the breeding herd. And it's probably made the most difference and the most profit in terms of applying it through a breeding herd. I won't say get sick is a very strong way to put it, but I get weary of hearing people say, I don't want to sit in a cell barn all the time, or that I don't want to trade stockers all the time. It can be applied and should be applied more frequently and usefully than a breeding herd than would say be a seasonal type herd. We do apply it to both, or as my wife would say, it's applied to everything in our life, whether it be a vehicle or a vacation, what is overvalued, what's undervalued, that kind of thing. And it's just a change of way of thinking.
I love it. And I think that when you adopt sell-by as a real philosophy, as opposed to I have to be trading stockers through the sell barn, it becomes pretty powerful.
Yep, I think so as well.
Okay, so let's talk because you apply it in multiple enterprises. So you applied it in a cow enterprise, in a stocker enterprise, and actually 4, and then in a breeding sheep enterprise and a feeder sheep enterprise.
Correct.
I would like to start, if we can, with a feeder sheep enterprise.
Okay.
Can you describe how you apply sell-by principles there and how it is different from buy-sell?
So we look at a day of weaning and pull market reports, what's overvalued and undervalued in that flock. And then essentially we market quickly the overvalued, and then we basically retain and feed, but we also buy and add to those groups as we feed them until we feed them all out through the year. So we may sell 100 X weight lambs that are ready to go and replace them with smaller lambs to match to make our loads more consistent as we go through.
And to make the weights make sense, you're dealing primarily in hair sheep. Correct?
We are dealing with hair sheep, yes. And we're primarily dealing in 40 to 78, 80 pound lambs. So you're looking at, depending on weather, 60 to 90 day turns.
Yep.
So it does move very fast.
Yep.
In normal conditions, they are very high returns in a very short amount of time. Usually cumulative over an annual period, they're like 150% return. Mm-hmm. So it does.
With a fairly low capital investment.
With a very low capital investment, because if you look at an entry price on a lamb that size, a 40 pound lamb is going to be $70 to $100.
Right. Under $100 on the end, 150 to 200 on the out.
Yeah. And I get calls all the time. I won't say all the time, but frequently about, hey, if I were going to start a sheep enterprise, what I would do? And they'll be like, everyone tells me I should go out and buy ewe lambs or ewes. And I was like, no, if I were going to do it again, and I'm not saying I'm right, I would start with feeder lambs because it's a low capital investment, build cash, and then go into a breeding enterprise. Because there's a lot of lifestyle components that comes with these short enterprises as well. Freedom, especially if you have a young family or something like that.
Cool. And then there's also opportunities. If you find yourself going down a road you don't want to go down,
yeah, it's easy to sell out.
Easy to get out.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah. Love it.
most people tend to be emotionally attached to their breeding stock.
Okay.
And you don't want to liquidate that very quickly.
Yeah. How do you care for these, what we call feeder sheep?
It's very simple. I think it's very simple. We see the early ones twice a day, 20, 30 minutes a pen. We walk those, feed those, that kind of thing like that. And then after 2 to 3 weeks, when they're moved into bigger pens, it's a once a day deal. And
this is on feed in a dry lot, like a feedlot type situation.
So out here, you guys would call it a feedlot.
Yeah.
Because of our humidity and moisture, we are actually under roof. But
it's a mud lot if you're outside.
It would be a mud lot if you're outside. So in certain seasons, but this time of year is more for shade than anything else.
Yeah.
But we don't feed a lot this time of year. We start picking up in July, August.
Yeah.
So it's also a seasonal enterprise for the most part.
Yeah. So you're picking up lambs primarily when they're being weaned. Right?
Being weaned, yeah.
And July, August, September, months for
little lambs
coming to market.
Yeah. Then we'll feed those out. And we're usually done by or before Easter.
Yeah.
We do not like the holidays because it creates a lot of emotion. It creates a lot of buying opportunities, but most people seeing the selling opportunities.
Okay. And that's an important point. So you are not necessarily timing the market for Easter, for Eid,
we like to market those times if we have the right class, but we do not build our strategy around that because there's more failure involved with that. If there's a glut or
you miss it by a week,
you miss it by days.
Yeah.
Okay. That actually happened to me last year. We overbought. One of our buyers pulled out of what he normally takes on his order. Right. So it was a $28,000 loss very quickly from a speculative thing. In a sell buy situation, they tell you, and you were taught to not speculate. You deal with today only. But I could not liquidate those lambs quickly because if I would have sent them out that many at one time, it would have slugged the market and I would have really taken a bath. So it took 6 weeks to sell out of those.
Yeah.
So
great. Yeah.
Lesson learned.
Good lesson. Yeah, really good. Let's talk a little about your relationship with buyers and sellers. You buy most of your lambs yourself. Is that correct?
Buy most of the lambs ourselves. We buy, I want to say zero cattle. There's very few cattle that I actually buy. Yeah. And I actually prefer not to.
Okay. But you've got a local market that has a volume of sheep that suits your needs generally. Right?
Sheep or private treaty. I would like to touch on that really quick. I get there's a lot of wording around prefer not to buy out of a livestock barn. I'd rather buy them. So after tracking death loss and sick lambs for 3 years, there is no difference from getting them off. Actually, and that's a little dishonest, or actually death loss is higher coming off farm than it is out of a sale barn. And I don't know if it's they can't handle stress. I don't know what the reason is. But we do our tracking. Death loss is about 5% off farm from other people than it is coming from the sale barn.
Wow.
And I'm looking into that, but I just wanted to touch on that real quick because there is a mental thing around there.
Yeah.
We do buy most of our own sheep because order buyers for that are not as common. And I'm going to be at that sale for the most part anyway. But it's not, I don't go to the sale every week. That's the other thing I hear people, I don't sit in the sale barn all the time. When I go to sell lambs, I will usually buy lambs and replace, but it's not like a weekly thing I do.
Okay.
We have in the past when I have time and I have the volume, but like right now I've been to 2 sales since December the 31st. That's it.
Wow.
So,
and we're at the end of June.
June to June. Yep.
Okay.
So I try to manage and bumper some time there as well.
Yep.
Cattle, I have somebody else buy them. We work in 3 or 4 barns there in different regions when we buy and some private treaty stuff, but they're going to do a better job than I am. It frees me up because most of our sales are toward a weekend. So I have time with my children, as well as there's an interesting book, Who Not How, and I try to hire who's. So the who, they can buy them, the who, they can find a truck for them, and they get to my lot, then I can process them.
Yeah. Love it.
And so I spend very little time with that.
Okay. For anybody that's not heard of it, Who Not How is co-authored by a guy named Dan Sullivan.
Yep.
A great book about how basically to use people to make your business more.
I think we should call it utilizing people.
That is exactly what we should say.
Yeah.
But it is about, we have this very solopreneur type ethic in our industry.
Yep.
And it's about, look, let's bring real professionals on that can help do more and better than what we can do by ourselves.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Good reference. Okay.
So then we've applied that on to other classes of livestock that we use because we're not into one thing at any one time.
Correct.
We bump in and out of whether it be thin cows, the fat cows, open cows, the bred cows, the pairs, short bred cows, the long-term bred cows. And we actually look at that. It's not about necessarily what we want. It's more about what our grass needs are.
Yeah.
So like we actually sell out of stockers earlier than most people because when we get to June, our grass is pretty well full bloom and gone in terms of quality. So we try to be out of stockers by the end of May, early June, and then replace with cows or something like that that can handle
lower quality
forage.
Rainfall, 40 inches?
We're probably 32 to 48, depending.
Okay. And your elevation is your 2,000 or 3,000 feet? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The other location where we farm is 2,200.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so again, you're typical of the Southeast, more montane, so probably higher quality than lower elevation stuff near you, but fairly high rainfall environment, high productivity.
High productivity, but quality will disappear very quickly. And then storage is an issue. So it does not retain quality like it may be in a windrow or something like that in the West. Yeah.
Because of the high humidity.
Because of high humidity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will decay fast.
What kind of humidity do you deal with? This is just a fascinating.
Oh, it's humid.
Like the air is water.
It's not like Alabama, Mississippi. And I don't want to be.
I don't know that I can tell the difference.
Well, yeah, you can.
It's like temperatures over 100 or below 40 below. Yeah, you can't really.
Yeah. So as my wife would say when she goes out of a morning, it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 shower kind of day. Or another lady that we used to do some business would say, I've lost that fresh as a daisy feeling when I went outside. So
as soon as you step out of the air.
As soon as you step out of the
air. Okay. And so the nice thing is you come out of the dairy business, which in my mind confers just by experience for most people, a high degree of stockmanship, right? An ability to deal with animals of different kinds. You've taught yourself sheep, you've taught yourself beef cattle. And so you have a unique ability in my mind to go back and forth, and you do it multiple times per year between different classes of beef cattle, between different classes of sheep, back and forth from cattle to sheep, right? As you go through the year and as you go through different markets. So that is something that most of us can't do as easily as you. The other thing you do is your operation is fairly close together, right? What's the geographical extent? How far is it from one end to the other?
It's 16 miles, which to most people
in West Virginia is like 4 hours of driving.
It's just 40 minutes. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it's a long drive.
It's a long drive.
It's not a long way.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go back to working with people part a little bit, because let's talk about selling your lambs. So how are you doing that?
We move through different channels. So in 5 or 6 years of doing that, no year has ever been the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's been one year maybe that 90% of them go directly to a killer or an off-farm buyer. And then the next year, it's almost 100% go to different sale barns.
Mm-hmm.
It's never, we're not supposed to use always and never, but I can say it's never been the same.
Yeah. And
lacks continuity there.
Yep.
I like that. And I also hate that. The thing I like about it forces you to be flexible, because the time I have been bid, I was relying on XYZ client to take his order of land.
Like your cancer last year.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about. And I understand why you can take him. I'm not mad about it. If you can't sell them, you shouldn't take them.
Right.
Lesson learned.
But in your part of the world, the ethnic market out of Chicago, New York, big urban areas, not that.
No, we actually travel to markets to get lambs out to other places. Our closest market for sheep is an hour and 15 minutes. Our wool lambs will go 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
That kind of thing like that. When we move those.
Yeah. 5.5 hours, 125, 150 miles.
No, it's actually a little further. That's on the interstate miles. Yeah.
Okay, good. Even the interstate in West Virginia is not. Yeah. It's not the same.
Nothing's the same. That's right.
I think in Wyoming, there are parts where you could screw your steering wheel into place and just leave it there for a few hours.
I do believe, and you could check me on this, but I think West Virginia has more miles of road because of getting in and out than any other state in the U.S. I could be wrong on that, and it's okay if I'm wrong.
Yeah. But it's not very big, right?
No, it's not a very big state.
But boy, it's chopped up.
Yep, chopped up. Yep.
All right, very good. Anything else on that working with buyers and purchasers?
Real quick, I'm not a patient person, but it took me a long time to develop a relationship with a sale barn.
Yeah.
And someone wrote an article about that. I think that may have been Doug. I don't remember, about how you get in and out. And there's a lady here teaching, talked about in Australia, her name is Mel, and how difficult it was for her, both as a woman, but also to be taken seriously as a buyer in Australia. And I didn't say this because there is the man-woman thing.
Yeah.
And obviously not that I'm a woman, but I have not seen that being a man-woman thing here. I see it. There's already a set of buyers.
It's an inside-outside.
It's an inside-outside.
Yeah.
And to get into that, in this one barn I was at, it took me 18 months. Even just for the manager to communicate back with me on what's there that day, that kind of thing like that.
And what was it that got you? You did it. What did you do for 18 months that kind of got you in the door?
Wore the crap out of him.
Yeah.
So I got tired of him. He was an older guy, but oddly, he was not a phone guy. He was a Facebook guy.
Whoa.
He would only communicate. It took me 6 months to figure out he would only communicate on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't understand. They wouldn't answer the market phone. He wouldn't answer his cell phone. But if you send him a message on Facebook, which I didn't figure out, somebody else told me that.
Right.
He would respond to you in seconds. And that's what it was. But for a gentleman that's 60 to 70 years old, that was odd. But it took figuring that out. Another market I work in.
And you're a phone person, aren't you?
I would prefer to be texted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of where I live, my service is poor. And so I don't have great access to Facebook Messenger or even a phone call. Yep. So I'd prefer to
So
be
text is your preferred. That's interesting.
Yep.
And those two things seem similar,
but they're not.
If you're texting and he's Facebooking, then you're in two different worlds.
And I hate Facebook. I'm on it, but usually for marketing reasons or anyway.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that? That's good because I think Doug and Wally and a number of people talk about the importance of the relationship with the marketers.
Yep.
And it is up to you. If you're going to reap the benefits, you have to be the
one to put in the work.
Relation.
Yeah.
And it's work.
Yeah, it is work. It is actually more work than the other stuff. And that's what I'm coming to learn. The people part is always more work.
Aaron, we've talked about sheep and we've talked a little about cattle, but let's jump over to cows for a minute, or cows and stockers for a minute. And then I'd like to wrap up talking about sell by in a breeding herd and how you're looking at the sheep bell curve. So if we could talk about cows and stockers first, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can go. I don't know what to say too much there because we have different grass resource. We'd have different time capabilities and markets are always different. There may be a strong value of gain in one class and there's not in another.
Yep.
Or a profit potential or however you want to look at it. So we will try to, if you have a pool of assets, and I don't have a large pool of assets to compete with others, I have to turn my pool of assets 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
And so when we look at doing that, we're always looking at where is our best profit potential with the grass resource we have, but especially with our labor resource. We could do a lot more high risk type stuff, but I don't necessarily have the labor to manage all that at one time.
Yeah.
So we take that in chunks. So we will move in and out of classes to accommodate return, what it does to our people and our grass resource.
Yeah.
And so I actually prefer the cow side of it. There's more dependability and more options than there are with stockers.
Yeah.
And the labor.
Yeah.
I like the stockers on short turns.
Yeah.
And so that's my comparison.
And when you say short turns, what do you mean there?
We love to gather stockers, whether it be cutter bulls and make them steers, or to gather different groups, background them, get them ready to go for other clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will remarket them in a 60 to 90 day period.
Yeah. Okay.
So we take
fairly fast.
Yeah, we take a lot of risk by doing that, but our clients are very happy with the product they get.
Yeah.
And we're able to usually get a premium by doing that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So then let's talk about the cows.
Okay. The cows.
Tell me what you're doing there. Yeah.
There's no one thing. Like I say, I could probably blow through that fairly quickly. This year, it's been buying a lot of bred cows.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them will be with us.
Wait a minute. I heard the cow market is high.
High to what? So there's a relatively, it's been cheap to a stocker.
Right.
So we're buying bred cows cheaper than we can buy one stocker.
Yep.
So some of those have been with us a year. That we'll calve those out, market the calves off of them, and then sell them back as breds. Some of them are short-bred cows we bought that we will sell back in the fall as breds. So we will clean them up, get some weight on them, that kind of thing.
Advance them to a
different class.
A late stage of pregnancy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it's either taking an open to a bred, a thin to a fat, a bred to a pair. And we typically turn those fairly quickly as well. 4 months is normal. It's very rare that we've kept cows for a year.
Yeah.
But they were an extremely good buy.
Yeah.
They had calves on them and they're bred back, and we've calved them now a second time in that year. So
and the calves were worth good money.
The calves were worth more than what the cows were.
How many days a year do you feed a cow in your country?
We usually feed 12 to 20 days. This winter, we had to feed more.
Yeah.
We had a lot.
Yeah, because you had a rough winter.
We had a rough winter compared to normal. And I'm not talking about knee-deep snow, but it was constant wet, cold, destroying stockpile, that kind of thing like that.
Yeah, and I think your wet cold is way harder than our dry cold.
I'm not going to speak to that.
I would rather deal with snow and temperatures below freezing than temperatures near freezing with rain.
I don't like the rain and cold. I don't like wind, though, either.
Yeah.
So when I speak with you and the wind's blowing, it makes me hurt.
Yeah.
So
I really prefer like sunny and 75.
I do too.
So that's nice.
I think there's a song about that.
With about a 7 mile an hour wind works out perfect.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Yep. Good. Okay. So now most people that listen to this podcast have heard of Wally Olson's cowbell curve, where we look at the increase and decrease of a female. You and a couple others, I think you and Austin and maybe even Sam collaborated to put together a sheep bell curve. And let's talk a little about what that is and what it means and what some of the important differences are between it and the cowbell curve.
Yeah, Austin and I were intrigued by that. So I built one, sent it to him for a review and that kind of thing. And what was interesting about that is in any curve, there's a curve. So there's the main curve.
Yeah.
So the overarching one. I was more intrigued by what happened within the curve.
Yeah.
So we basically took that out and built out because there are different stages through a year where You may go from bred to open to rebred, or may go to a pair situation. And so we were looking at ours. And so there's the overarching curve that gives the value from one place to another and over time in a year.
Yep.
But you can also take that and break that apart. And on the inner side of the curve, it looks more like shark teeth.
Right.
Because what happens is there's dramatic moves within a year. There's opportunities to sell and buy within that time period that I think we often overlook during those year periods. And it's more applicable in sheep because of the gestation is so much shorter.
So let's talk about that, because that's the thing that I come to. As soon as I saw that curve, it's a cow actually works very nicely on an annual cycle, a calendar year, 12-month cycle, right? You have a 270-day gestation period, right? And by the time you wean a calf, you have, usually exceeded 365 days. But you could lamb her in April, wean her in August, and then wait until December to breed her. Right. And so you have this long period with no real economic activity.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And it's a production business. It's scale to make that work.
Correct.
There are multiple areas, even on the cow curve.
Yes. Totally agree.
From moving to an open to a bred, that kind of thing, to increase cash flow.
Yeah. But it is a longer cycle.
It is a longer cycle. Yeah. And so that goes back to, we talk about people wanting to get into this, or young people wanting to get into an industry with little capital.
Yep.
That's the beautiful thing about a sheep. You like them or hate them, they offer a lot of advantage in terms of time and flexibility that cattle do not.
Yeah.
They're also a great learning tool. I can't remember if it was Shannon or somebody told me one time that they go to a ranch to help with sheep. He says the people that come from the ranch with sheep are way better stockmen than the people that go from cattle to sheep.
Yeah.
And there's a different, and you commented on stockmanship a while ago, and I think you've given me way too much credit. I am not a good stock person. I am intrigued by flexibility, but I am not a good stock person. We're trying to learn, but I am not good.
We can argue that, but I think when you come out of a dairy environment, dairy people have a different relationship with animals than most beef producers. Is that fair?
I think good cowmen or cow ladies are more in tune to what's going on.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
But it's a different perspective, right? It's a daily encounter.
It's more of a
you
marriage.
never turn out a dairy cow for 180 days and not see them, or you can do that with a beef cow.
Yeah.
You get results in the tank every day.
It's instant gratification.
So when I talk to dairy people, they talk about the type of music that is being played by their workers. They talk about the tone of voice and the level of volume of voice. You get a loud worker in a dairy barn, that person, dairy people are very sensitive to that.
Yep. A different salesman coming on, or any little thing, a rain event. Cows will eat drastically before rain.
Yeah.
During the rain, they won't eat. So it affects bulk tank. So you have to feed extra during that rain.
And that very short-term feedback, I think, creates a very different, and the sort of intimacy of the relationship, if we will, and the frequency of the contact creates a different perspective when it comes to stockmanship.
Yeah.
So we can argue about it.
I'm not trying to argue.
If you want, but
I was just trying to point out.
No, it's
don't label me.
Yeah. I'm still going to leave you with that label, but that's okay. So again, let's go back to the shark tooth curve within your sheep bell curve. So within a multi-year cycle, we have then an annual cycle where we tend to have depressed prices late summer, right? When many sheep are weaned, and then it tends to
pick up as they get
correct. And the other thing you can do with a ewe that you can't do as well with a cow is you can sell a ewe as exposed.
You can sell them
without much loss of value.
Yeah. There's very little difference between a preg checked or a scanned ewe versus exposed ewe.
Yeah. Confirmed pregnant by ultrasound is not that different than, she was in with a bunch of 1,000 that were with bucks.
Yeah. It's $15.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the right client, it may be 25, but it's usually $15 difference. It's a double of your money on the price of the scan.
Yeah.
But in terms of actual, and there's a big difference there. And we talked about this in class yesterday. Cattle breed up maybe 70, 80%. Okay. And the ones that are doing much better than that, my hat's off to you. But
in your environment, preg rates are typically low.
Yeah.
Yes. Compared to the rest of the country.
Nationally, they're lower than what we brag about.
I would agree with that. I think higher quality grass areas tend to do better.
Yep. Yeah. We used to have the old adage that you could put a ram in a corn crib and run the flock by and they're still going to be pregnant.
Yeah.
Jerseys are the same way, it seems like. But so it's not as big a deal. It's very rare to have many open sheep. So I think that's the thing. A confirmed pregnant cow is completely different than an exposed ewe, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
very good. Okay. So then again, what are the opportunities then in a sell-by context that show up because of the recognition of that pattern and watching that? And again, we're talking a little generally about how the year works, but we're still always watching the actual relationships. So
everyone gets stuck into, you have to lamb something out.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to back up and just say it becomes a people and lifestyle thing.
Okay.
So there's the paradigm that we've got to lamb something out.
Yep.
Okay. If I sell a ewe that's bred, I used to visit with an EL board mate of mine about this all the time in her goat
Shout
flock.
out to Sarah Banger. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
This is my favorite Sarah Banger quote, and there are many.
Yeah. Mine is ditches and bitches. Ask her about that sometime. Yeah.
Language.
She says there's more people who've been killed in the West over ditches than bitches. I apologize for the language, but I'll never forget her saying that. Long story short is when I sell a bred female, I have essentially sold a lamb crop within the ewe. My risk is gone. So from there to lambing to weaning, all of the risk is occurred from predator, parasite, lambing difficulty, nutritional difficulty. So it's a risk exposure thing. It's also a lifestyle thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people always say a breeding herd can't be seasonal. I'm just completely opposite.
Yeah.
I don't understand the point of wintering a cow. I don't understand the point of necessarily lambing all of your ewe. I don't. That's a paradigm for me.
Yeah.
I've done all that.
Yeah.
I don't like it anymore. I don't see the point of doing it.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add on that? Anything else you want to add just generally about sell by marketing and how you're applying it?
There has to be a mental shift in terms of as a cash flow business. The thing is, I am not an established farmer rancher, and so we don't have a large land asset that we continually can borrow off of or preserve. And I do understand there's generational land and there's an emotional tie to that. I don't quite think that the resource is always being utilized, but that's a personal thing. So we don't have that. So we have to be in a cash flow business. That's how we that's how we buy groceries and pay our bills and that kind of thing. So I think that opportunity is often overlooked because people are not willing to make a decision. So by thereby not making a decision, you've effectively made a decision to not do anything.
Yep.
I also would say that it's a very good way for someone beginning and or young or whatever context to begin a career if they really want to look at it.
Yeah.
But I love the flexibility and the freedom. We were written about in a magazine article, and the lady there to write it said, "This seems very complex." And I said, "You're right from the standpoint of the way I'm describing it and the way I'm writing it, or you're writing it. If I were reading it, it would sound very complex. But it's actually just the opposite. It's actually giving us freedom and simplicity over running a traditional just breeding production enterprise."
Yeah. And the challenge is keeping it simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Last question I want to ask you before I let you go. You come at this from a bit of a unique perspective. What are good resources for people that want to be better in our business?
In the sell-by?
Whole thing. So you mentioned who, not how as an example. You're a reader. You consume a lot of education.
Yeah. There's a book list. So who, not how, and then 10X is easier than 2X. Those are written by the same author, Dan Solomon. I love extreme ownership. It teaches me more about people every time I read it. And every time every time we're exposed to that, I expose my children to that. There's some different principle. Stockmanship is often overlooked and regarded as an expensive school. I would hate to tell anyone that teaches this, but it's probably worth 10 to 15 times of what they charge. I would not want to write that check, but now having the experience, I would gladly write it if I had to.
But you would if you had to.
Yeah, I would ask for a payment plan.
But that's fair.
You know, that kind of thing. Ranch for profit, marketing schools. I love the networking opportunities at events like this because I learn a great deal from that. Events you guys have put on. What was Bob Palmer's class called?
The Zone Rancher.
Yeah. And I've talked about that here to several couples that were here this week. That was something that's often overlooked in terms of the mental wherewithal of what we can express, and learned a lot through that. So if people have an opportunity to get to Bob, I think that is a very interesting thing as well.
Good. And a quick note on that. We are starting a new round of sessions with Bob. August. I don't have the exact date, but it's like the 3rd or 4th week of August. It's a week after most kids are going back to school. Yeah. So we were trying to do it 1st of September. We're just a little ahead of that.
Good deal.
And that's two 8-week blocks that describe it. What did you learn working with Bob?
I learned a lot about myself and in terms of what our abilities are and can be, and maybe roadblocks mentally, that kind of thing. He gave us a set of tools, and with my lack of personality and dealing with people, to do much better at that.
I think lack of personality is the problem. We can ask Tara about that. Anyway, go ahead.
to do better with people.
Yeah.
And as well as when you're in certain situations that you're not comfortable in, tools to work through that.
But again, dealing with not how you speak or any of that thing, but dealing with how you are mentally.
Yeah, you can't change other people.
Correct.
But you can change yourself.
Yeah.
And that, working within that context and paradigm was pretty powerful.
Yeah. And Bud used to talk a lot about getting yourself mentally right. And Bob is the first person I've met who has like tools to teach you how to be.
He's the only one that I've come across that systemize that.
Yeah.
He has a book. You can read the book, but take the class.
Interesting.
Read the book after, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
cool. Yeah. And the book is Mind Over Target.
I can't recall.
It's available on Amazon.
Yes, and it's a very inexpensive
relatively inexpensive paperback book. Lots of good information. But I agree that personal interaction with Bob is very...
I always tell people, if you read the book first, that it actually shuts down some things. Whereas if you actually do the class, you're a little more open-minded.
Yeah.
And then that kind of thing.
Good. And you've taken RFP once? Have you taken multiple times? Just once?
Just once.
Okay. And
we
then
will do it again.
You were in EL?
Yep.
2 or 3 years there?
3 or 4.
Yeah, good. Recall. And then you have built through all that. You've also built a network of contacts of people that you call, right?
Yes.
And you are very good at calling people and asking questions.
Probably too good.
Too good.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as too good?
I'm sure some of the people.
Sometimes you ask complicated questions that are hard to answer.
They may want to be left alone. They're like, why is this guy calling again?
But you're also willing to do that for other people.
Absolutely. But I will. I interacted with the gentleman here and I asked for his grace and forgiveness, probably too much. But he said he had called and I had never returned his call. And I said, where I live, I said, and I'm going to say it again. If you're getting a hold of me, you text me. Because I rarely get a voicemail.
Yeah.
And if I do, it's 2 and 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
And so if you text me, you need me, I will text you back and say, next week, today, I'll call you in a minute.
Yeah.
But where I live. And it's not that I like texting. It's just where I live.
It works.
It works.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Aaron, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me today. I appreciate the relationship we've had over the last couple of years.
Likewise.
We have learned a bunch from you, and I know it's mutual, so it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you joining us.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchonomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.